Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The head of the American delegation to the International Atomic Energy Agency meeting did not dismiss the possibility that Washington will unilaterally present Iran's nuclear issue to the United Nations Security Council. His statements came a few hours after the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that Tehran suspended all its uranium enrichment programs. Meanwhile, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammad al-Baradei, stated that Iran's suspension of its uranium enrichment program is indefinite. He added that they shouldn't halt future negotiations with the European Union, pending a time frame for Iran's weapons program. Iran finally pulled the rug from underneath the feet of those who are trying to drag the country into the chambers of the United Nations Security Council and those who want to impose sanctions on the country. Tehran recently resorted to the policy of the carrot and stick during their negotiations with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. This led them to give up their demands to continue their research and development of the uranium enrichment technology, thus reducing fears that they are seeking to develop a nuclear bomb. 6 months after a similar agreement failed between Iran and the European Union, the International Atomic Energy Agency Council is drafting a resolution on Iran's nuclear program. There were indications that the Europeans were going to agree to this resolution. France, Britain, and Germany drafted a proposal calling on Iran to freeze all its sensitive nuclear programs. The proposal, however, does not include clauses that would punish Tehran if they continue these programs.
We have reached a final agreement with the member countries of the European Union. During 4 days of negotiations, we discussed topics of importance to Iran. Fortunately, the EU has accepted this. The documents for the resolution are now ready and are based on the Paris Agreement.
Washington did not welcome this resolution, saying it's soft. However, it did not oppose the resolution. The 35 members of the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors voted on it. According to the agreement, Iran promised to stop all activities related to the processing of the plutonium and the uranium enrichment. This is a process to purify uranium, which is used to fuel nuclear power plants or to manufacture weapons from highly enriched uranium. In return, France, Britain, and Germany spoke on behalf of the European Union, offering economic and political incentives to Iran, also offering a light water reactor. Despite the fact that many Iraqi Sunni parties have demanded the postponement of the general elections, the Iraqi interim government insisted on conducting the elections as scheduled on January 30th, 2005. This position was expressed by the Iraqi Prime Minister Iyad Allawi when he said that he is aware of the position of some of the parties that are calling for delaying the elections. However, there are other parties that are demanding that the elections be held as scheduled.
There are daily security developments, including car bombings, assassinations, and various security events, creating more dead and wounded among Iraqi civilians, the Iraqi police, and sometimes U.S. forces, as what happened in Samarra, Baghdad, Ba'quba, and Latakia. These scenes are common in most of the Iraqi regions, and dozens of political parties, 7 civilian organizations, and tribal elders are demanding that the Iraqi Prime Minister Iyad Allawi delay the elections for 6 months without making a decision on whether or not to boycott.
We feel that the security situation needs to improve so the people can vote without fear or pressure. We believe in delaying the elections and in coming to understanding about how to include other parties, which will help to improve the security situation.
The Supreme Independent Elections Commission responded by confirming that elections will take place as scheduled, according to the state administrative law that was passed, stating that elections cannot be held after January of next year. This was the reason used by the Commission in rejecting the delay. The president of the Iraqi Elections Commission has no authority to allow the delay because he heads a commission that was created by the United Nations, saying that it was a created agency, not a legal one. Meanwhile, delaying the elections needs to be openly discussed by Elections Committee, the Iraqi interim government, the United Nations, and the interim Iraqi parliament.
The Honorable Prime Minister deeply understands the importance of this opinion. However, he is also aware of other parties and national figures who insist on the need to conduct the elections at the scheduled time defined by the administrative law, in addition to resolutions passed by the Security Council.
This is a position agreed to by Washington, which was confirmed by its ambassador in Iraq, John Negroponte, after he visited the city of Fallujah. He said that the security situation does not warrant delaying the elections. This opinion is in line with the desires of most Shiite leaders who want the elections to be held at the scheduled time. The apparent political agreement reflects public opinion. 47% of those polled are in favor of holding the elections at the scheduled time. Meanwhile, 26% want to delay the elections until the security situation is stable. 78% polled believe that if the elections are delayed, it will not provide better security conditions to conduct them. And 22% believe that delaying the elections will provide a better chance to hold peaceful elections. The poll indicates that 56% of Iraqis believe that the result of the elections do not express the confidence of the Iraqi people, while 44% believe the opposite. As Sunni parties call for delaying the elections for security or administrative reasons, and as Shiite spiritual leaders warn against the danger of postponing the elections for strategic and political reasons, Iraq lives at a crossroad, which is both sensitive and dangerous. The days ahead will be a theater for both political and security events.
The leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, confirmed that Tehran will never stop its peaceful nuclear program, saying that this is a red line that Iran will not cross. Meanwhile, angry protesters held a demonstration in front of the British embassy in Tehran, protesting the European position towards Iran's nuclear program and demanding that the Iranian government expel the British ambassador. Iran was vocal in expressing its unhappiness with the International Atomic Energy Agency's resolution concerning its peaceful nuclear program. However, this is the best possible alternative to pass through this bottleneck under these exceptional circumstances.
The European draft resolution is important in this time. Considering the national interests of the country, it does not guarantee all of our objectives, but it does help build confidence between the two sides.
The agency's resolution calls on Iran to suspend the uranium enrichment program, which Iran voluntarily agreed to. However, it does not specify for how long. At the last second, Tehran decided to exclude the 20 central diffusion systems from the negotiations, which almost destroyed them. Amidst this diplomatic battle, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, confirmed that Tehran will never stop its peaceful nuclear program, saying that this is a red line. He made these comments while he was meeting with the Venezuelan president, Hugo Chavez. Meanwhile, hundreds of Iranian students expressed their anger toward the European and the British position in particular by holding a demonstration outside the British embassy in Tehran, demanding that the Iranian government expel the British ambassador. They burned the American and Israeli flags and chanted slogans, even criticizing the Iranian foreign ministry and the way it managed this crisis. The demonstration later transformed into confrontations with police officers, which forced the riot police to intervene by using tear gas bombs to disperse demonstrators. Although ordinary and official Iranians are unhappy with the agency's resolution, political observers believe that it reflects relative success for Iran, especially in managing to avoid sending Tehran's nuclear file to the United Nations Security Council. The United States of America was eager to achieve this goal. Labib Bahrouz, Al-Alam Television, Tehran. Humanitarian aid continues to arrive the city of Fallujah 3 weeks after the occupation army launched a comprehensive attack against armed fighters in order to control the city. In the wake of the attack, the United States announced that 2,000 Iraqis were killed and 1,000 others were imprisoned. Iraqi medical sources expressed worries that about 6,000 Iraqi civilians have been killed during the American attack, and that thousands of families are now in critical need of food and medical aid. The city still lacks water and electricity.
We brought aid today, and we might distribute it tonight and tomorrow morning. We have some afflicted families here. We have a meeting with the American leadership, so we can coordinate our efforts in this regard.
Eyewitnesses say that it is hard to get around the city because a large number of dead bodies are still scattered there. Despite this, there are no reports that diseases have spread. About 2/3 of Fallujah's homes need to be rebuilt, which means that about 250,000 residents cannot go back to their city at least for another 2 months. Those who stayed in the city cannot get out.
We do not need water, food, tomatoes, or cucumbers. We want to get out of Fallujah.
Iraqi and occupation forces are still clashing with some armed fighters, but the occupation forces still say that the security situation will improve, so the coming elections can be held despite the attacks that might be launched by the armed fighters. Military sources predict that Fallujah may become quiet again, just like what happened in Thawra, As-Samarra, Tal al-Athar, and the Sadr cities. The occupation forces acknowledged that they are taking steps to ensure that Fallujah residents can go back to their city in order to avoid another humanitarian catastrophe.
His Majesty King Abdullah stressed Jordan's keenness to maintain Palestinian unity and voiced support for the Palestinian government's efforts to carry out elections scheduled for January. The King made the remarks during a meeting with Chief of the Palestinian Liberation Organization PLO Mahmoud Abbas, Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Qrayh, and Interim President of the Palestinian National Authority Rouhi Fattouh. The King underlined the need to seize the chance now available to continue efforts aiming at establishing an independent and viable Palestinian state. This, the King said, requires the commitment of both the Palestinians and Israelis to the roadmap peace plan, and that the expected Israeli withdrawal from Gaza Strip should be part of the plan, as well as the beginning of a complete Israeli pullout from all the Palestinian lands. The King pledged that Jordan would continue efforts with the international community to enable the Palestinians to carry out the elections. His Majesty said he would urge the U.S. administration during his next visit to Washington to support the Palestinian government's efforts to establish the Palestinian state through reviving the Middle East peace process. Expressing his appreciation for the King's supportive stance and efforts, Abbas said regaining order and law in the Palestinian territory was a key priority for his government to carry out the elections. After separate talks with Prime Minister Faisal al-Fayez, the Palestinian leaders underlined their commitment to the roadmap and called on Israel to respect its obligations to the internationally recognized peace plan. They said their main concern at present is to carry out the elections smoothly and peacefully. Jordan was the second leg of the Palestinian Troika's Arab tour, which has also taken them to Egypt to brief Arab leaders on their plans for the coming stage. In Gaza Strip, one Israeli soldier was killed when a tunnel collapsed on him in southern Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said the tunnel was under the Gaza-Egypt borders and might be used to smuggle arms. Meanwhile, 2 members of the Islamic Hamas group were killed in a clash with Israeli soldiers in eastern Gaza Strip. A spokesman for Azz-ad-Din al-Qassam Brigade's Hamas military wing said the 2 were killed when they attacked a military site southeast of Gaza City. The men were identified as Khamis Ghazali and Muhammad al-Kharroubi. Yesterday, Israeli soldiers killed 2 Palestinians and wounded 2 others in the southern Gaza Strip. Palestinian medics said one of the dead was a doctor who was walking by his home near the Gaza-Egypt border when he was hit by Israeli gunfire. They added that the second was killed as he was under a place Israeli troops claim it was used by gunmen. Medics said because of heavy fog covering the area, it was impossible to evacuate any additional casualties from along the border road until daybreak. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has approved a revised route for Israel's West Bank barrier, suggesting that he would ease other restrictions. However, Israel's rerouted barrier will cut through 8% of the West Bank, less than half of what was originally planned. The planned 600-kilometer-long barrier of cement-walled, razor-wire-tipped electronic fences and trenches was rerouted after Israel's Supreme Court ordered adjustments last June to minimize land confiscations from Palestinians. The barrier had initially been planned to snake deep into the West Bank and loop around numerous Jewish settlements. Palestinians say that tens of thousands of villagers caught on the Israeli side of the barrier would be cut off from relatives, farmland, hospitals, and schools. Israel has claimed that the barrier, judged illegal by the UN's International Court of Justice in July, was a temporary security measure. A suicide car bomber plowed into policemen waiting to collect their salary at a police station west of Ramadi, killing 12 people in the latest attack on Iraq's security forces. At least 10 people were wounded in the blast and 90% of the casualties were policemen. U.S. Marines, British troops and Iraqi forces have also launched an operation to hunt down insurgents and criminals in a cluster of lawless towns on the Euphrates just south of Baghdad. In an attack on a U.S. military base south of Baghdad, 13 U.S. Marines and 2 civilians were injured when a mortar bomb hit their base. The U.S. Army earlier said 1 soldier was killed and 2 others injured south of Baghdad. Earlier, 2 U.S. soldiers were killed and 3 others wounded when a mortar bomb targeted their convoy west of the capital. Also in the capital, Baghdad, Iraqi medical and security sources reported that 4 National Guards members have been killed and 3 wounded when a car exploded near their post. While near Samarra, 5 Iraqi civilians were killed and 2 injured when a car bomb exploded while a U.S. convoy was passing by. Among the killed are 2 men, 1 woman and 1 child.
The World Bank released a report saying that the Palestinian economy is suffering from deep stagnation due to the Israeli policy of closure, which hinders economic activities and constrains the movement of people and products. The World Bank demanded that Israel ease movement restrictions so the Palestinian economy can be revived, and urged the Palestinian Authority to speed reforms in order to achieve financial stability and create a suitable environment for foreign investment. The World Bank demanded that Israel ease movement restrictions in the occupied Palestinian territories, confirming that the Palestinian economy has deteriorated further because of the Israeli closure, which prevents the free movement of people and products. In a report called 4 Years of Intifada on Closures and the Palestinian Economy, the World Bank said that the average Palestinian income has decreased more than 30% since the beginning of the Intifada in September 2000. The World Bank's report also stated that about 25% of Palestinian workers are unemployed and that 75% of all Palestinians live below the poverty line. About 16% of the population, which is equivalent to 600,000 Palestinians, do not have access to basic food necessities to ensure their survival. Another report titled Poverty and the Financial Crisis Faced by the Palestinians, the World Bank confirmed that the donor countries have contributed to preventing malnutrition from spreading further. However, that does not change the fact that a large percentage of the Palestinian people are still poor and have already spent all their savings. The donor countries gave the Palestinians $383 million in 2003, of which $260 million were designated for emergency and humanitarian aid. An equivalent amount was allocated to the Palestinian Authority. The World Bank's report emphasized the need to help Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza, explaining that the Israeli policy of closures and restricting the movement of people and goods is behind the deterioration of the Palestinian economy. The Israeli closures also decreased the number of Palestinians working in Israel to less than 1,000 workers per day in the first 6 months of 2004. In contrast, about 120,000 Palestinian workers entered Israel on a daily basis in the first 6 months of 2000.
Test-fired a new version of its short-range nuclear-capable missile. Pakistani officials say the Ghazamvi surface-to-surface missile, which has a range of 290 kilometers, will have no negative impact on the peace process with India. The military said Pakistan's neighbors, including India, had been notified of the test in advance, and that Pakistan's nuclear and missile program will continue to be developed and tested. 6 weeks ago, Pakistan tested its Gori 5 missile, which has a range of 1,500 kilometers. Meanwhile, Pakistan's main opposition, Islamic Alliance, started an anti-government campaign demanding that President Pervez Musharraf sticks to an agreement to quit as an army chief by the end of this year. More in this report.
General Pervez Musharraf is out of Pakistan for a diplomatic tour, and Pakistanis are out on the streets of Karachi in protest. A coalition of 6 Islamic groups called the Muttahida Majlis al-Amal MMA or United Action Forum kicked off a campaign to force President Musharraf to stick to his promise to step down as army chief by December 31st, 2004.
Musharraf made a promise before the nation and the world on television. He should honor that promise. Otherwise, after December the 31st, we will not accept him as legitimate president either. He will not remain a president.
Musharraf had seized power in a military-led coup in 1999. He held parliamentary elections in 2002, but he changed the constitution, giving himself sweeping powers. Last year, the United Action Forum struck a deal in which they agreed to keep the president's sweeping powers in return for his promise to relinquish the post of army chief by December 31st. But this month, Pakistan's ruling party passed a bill that allows Musharraf to remain president and army chief until 2007. In recent months, Musharraf has hinted that he might retain the post. He said people wanted him to keep his uniform to maintain stability as he fights so-called terrorism.
General Musharraf will have to come to the people. He will have to agree to the demand of the people. He will have to submit to them. Who has given him the right to obey the U.S. against the will of the people?
Under U.S. pressure, Musharraf had pledged to fight so-called Islamic extremism. The policy angered the Islamic parties, who accused the international community of keeping silent to Musharraf's military ruling in return for helping the United States.
Bush is carrying out a war against Muslims. The Muslims also have the right to defend themselves. Our war against your aggression will continue.
A grouping of secular parties, the Alliance for Restoration of Democracy, has also announced a protest plan on the same issue on December 5th. But analysts say the agitation by the MMA and secular opposition parties poses no immediate threat to Musharraf because the pro-military Pakistan Muslim League dominates the parliament.
Southeast Asian leaders gathered in Laos for the annual Association of Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN Summit. Trade and security issues dominated talks, and political issues took a backseat.
Southeast Asian leaders kicked off their annual summit in the capital of Laos, Vientiane, where trade and security issues dominated talks. Southeast Asian countries signed an agreement that will move them a step closer to creating a European-style single market amid rising competition from neighbors China and India. The agreement is one of key measures in ASEAN's vision to establish a single market of more than 500 million people by 2020 to attract investors who see ASEAN as a fragmented market. ASEAN has also finalized a deal marking the first concrete steps towards a China-ASEAN free trade area, which will encompass a market of 1.8 billion people. Thailand's violence against its southern Muslim provinces cast a shadow over the meeting, but discussions were limited to sideline talks. Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra had threatened to walk out of the summit if leaders raised the crisis in the south. He insisted it was a domestic problem.
Delegates from 140 countries began a week-long conference in Nairobi to assess progress made in implementing a pact to eliminate landmines, which kill or maim more than 40 people around the world every day. As the conference got underway, Ethiopia became the 144th nation to ratify the Landmine Pact, and the conference will also try to convince China, Russia, and the United States to join the treaty.
It might be him today, but you might be in his place tomorrow. Every 24 minutes landmines claim a human life. Regardless of all diversities, most of the civilized world agrees that landmines imposes a very serious threat on humanity. With millions of them making whole areas uninhabitable, the world's 300,000 to 400,000 landmine survivors are spread over at least 121 countries to remind the world that something should be done to face this human-made beast.
We are saying no more mine in the world.
They should just come out without fear and make sure that people are blessed with a good life whereby they live normally without landmines on Earth.
In Kenya, the first international conference to review the 1997 Ottawa Convention on Anti-Personnel Mines opened and is attended by more than 1,000 delegates representing 120 countries, activist organizations and survivor groups. The pact, ratified by 143 countries, bans the use, production, stockpiling and transfer of any anti-personnel mines and stipulates that mined areas be cleared within 10 years.
May I now take this opportunity?
We must intensify conflict resolution efforts. Conflicts create conditions for production and use of anti-personnel mines. We should support and strengthen mechanisms established to resolve conflicts before these escalate into full-scale war.
Notably absent in the Kenyan capital for the conference were any official U.S. delegates. The United States is one of 42 countries, including China and Russia, that have refused to sign the treaty, citing the need to protect their troops. Meanwhile, in Tigray, northern Ethiopia, hundreds of deminers are working to ensure the ground is free of landmines so that local people can return to live and farm. Army soldiers were demobilized and retrained as mine clearance specialists. Funding is not only directed towards clearing minefields, but also towards rebuilding affected communities. The Rehabilitation and Development Organization RADO makes a special effort to make children aware of landmines. With 65% of them mines victims, child instructors are used to educate their peers.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin